The second reason I think that my Russian has ended up being better than my Japanese, perhaps not in every regard, but in most regards, is that I'm a much more experienced language learner now. When I can't do something properly in Russian, I realize that I can't do it, and I allow myself to accept that I can't do it, and then I have to pose the question, am I going to try and figure this out, or is it not important enough? I don't have any of that false confidence or that bluster that I used to have to some extent with Japanese. When I used to live in Japan, if I realized that I didn't know how to say something in Japanese, I'd tell myself that it wasn't that important. You didn't need to know how to say that. I could say it some other way. I can paraphrase that. That word's not important. Who cares about that? But I don't have that sort of attitude with respect to my Russian. I have a more sort of pure, dedicated attitude towards it, and that has helped me a lot, because you can't really work on problems when you won't acknowledge to yourself that you have those problems in the first place. So it's experience, maybe it's a little bit of maturity, maybe it's to do with changes in the way you invest your ego in different things that you pursue in life. But I think that I'm a better language learner now in that regard. Another reason that my Russian has ended up being better than my Japanese is that as you get older, you come to be interested in more and more different things. The number of different things that you have been interested in at some time in your life obviously goes up as you get older. It can't go down, right? It's a cumulative total. And what that means is that things that would not have been important to me in my early or mid-20s have, to some extent, come to be important to me now. So, when I was in my mid-20s, I would not have had any interest really in being able to talk about politics, Japanese politics, British politics, any sort of politics. Not something I was interested in, didn't care, so why develop the linguistic skills in a foreign language to talk about it, right? But because I have come to be interested, of course, in these different things to a greater or lesser extent as I've got older, I've had more incentive as I've gone along to actually try and develop the experience, the knowledge, the active vocabulary to talk about these things. That is a subtle factor, but I do think that it's a factor in the long term. You're not going to learn to talk about things that you're not interested in. So gradually, as you get older, you find yourself in a position in which you can allow yourself to think about new things. Going back to what I was saying a moment ago, when you spend a lot of your time communicating in live situations, real situations, where you're talking to people who are not there to help you. They're not your conversation partners or your teachers or anything like that. They're just there because they need to talk to you about something. When you spend a lot of time talking in that sort of context, you have to colour inside the lines. You have to rely on that language that you can use pretty well, pretty accurately, pretty quickly, pretty reliably in real time. And that makes it harder to experiment, makes it harder to try and use that expression or that piece of grammar that you kind of know but that you might not be able to use properly in real time. As I've learned more languages and lived in more different countries over the years, I've really come to realize this. I live in Spain at the moment, and when I speak Spanish to people that I don't know, I'm more careful. I don't try and say anything clever. I don't try and say anything creative, because if you trip up over your own feet, things are just going to get embarrassing. Even with friends and people you know, you're limited to some extent in what you can say. But in a context in which you are working with someone who is a teacher, even if they're your friend, even if they've become your friend, right? If they're a teacher in some sense, you can stop, you can say, hang on, I learned an expression the other day, can I dig it up? Is it going to work here? And you can say, oh no, it's gone, I've forgotten it. Or you can say, it's this, am I saying this right? You can do that and it won't annoy people. It won't get on their nerves because they too understand the context that you're operating within, right? That is important. That's very important. It really gives you a way of experimenting, playing, trying things out even when you know that they might be too difficult for you. That's a big factor, and that's something that you don't get very much of in real life. In real life conversation, it's easy to get into some sort of comfort zone. Whether you're aware of it or not, you're getting into a comfort zone, especially when you're quite good at the language in question, and you can say an awful lot of stuff. And when you realize that you can't say something that you want to say, you can just kind of skirt around it. The person you're talking to is never going to know that there was something that you wanted to say that you couldn't say, right? So you just have to skirt around things, and you do this, like I said, whether you're aware of it or not. And every time you do that, you're missing out on an opportunity to learn something new. And that's something that I think my unusual exposure to Russian has saved me from ending up doing, in a sense. Ironically, the way in which I have learned Russian, and many people are learning languages in quite isolated circumstances, isolated from their target language in the sense that they're not using it every day. When you learn a language the way that I've been learning Russian, it has its disadvantages, but it has its advantages. When you're talking to someone, there may be an element of true social interaction there, but you're doing it to improve. And when you maintain that mentality that insists that you're there to improve, to get better at things, to learn new words, new expressions, to master new grammar, whatever it may be, then that pushes you forward. There's no coasting. You're always trying to move forward. And I think that's another reason that my Russian has ended up being better than my Japanese in most regards, I think. So I don't know whether there's a moral to this story. Hopefully some of these observations have been at least mildly interesting. What I would say is that if you want to get better and better and better, if you want to get genuinely good at a foreign language and keep getting better, you must work to identify what you're not good at and work on it. If there's an area where your vocabulary is weak, then you have to find it and work on it. If there's a piece of grammar, a structure that you keep stumbling over, then you need to work on it. Osmosis, picking stuff up as you go along, is fantastic. My Japanese improved an awful lot when I was living in Japan, but there are boundaries and there are limits, and you will have blind spots and dark spots in your knowledge of the language, and you have to acknowledge that they exist. You have to figure out where and what they are, and you have to work on them. And I'm still doing that with Russian, and I'm still slowly but surely improving. And if I could go back and study Japanese again, I don't lose sleep over this, but if I could go back and study Japanese again, I would certainly incorporate my greater understanding now of what's required into my studies of Japanese second time round. You've got to figure out what you're not doing well and work on it. It's not just about talking a lot. You need conscious, dedicated practice. And I think that's been the key to me getting my Russian where it is, despite the fact that, hey, I live in Spain. So if there's anything that you'd like me to make a video about, you can let me know in the comments. I'll do my best to accommodate people who have specific interests. Until such time as specific interests come in, I'm going to sit here and blether. So I hope it's interesting for at least some of you. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.